Great. Again, everybody that's joining, thanks for coming today. Just trying to get my screen situated here a bit before we get going. Make sure that I've got everything recording and broadcasting properly. We've got quite a few people registered today, so there's a chance that we might overflow our Zoom account and need the YouTube Live going. So I just want to make sure before we dive in that we have that, and it looks like we do. All right, yeah, so I'm going to get started before. Sorry, hold on. All right, I guess that's how you know your YouTube Live is working, when you hit play and it starts playing back. So, yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Russell Defner with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, now based in the Philippines. So it's a little bit different setup for me on this end of the world. So hopefully y'all can hear me good, and the slide is up, the splash for the JOSM.org slide is up. Today, we're going to give you a webinar. Basically, it's a beginning webinar for the new year on the basics of JOSM. I'll be your host, so if you've got any questions or anything as we go along, feel free to pop them in the chat. I can try to answer those in real time, or if it's specific for the speakers or beyond my knowledge, I can try to chime in for you and get the speaker to pause and explain things a little better, or go over something if you missed it. On the call with me, we have the panelists. You can see Jeffrey, Michael, and Ralph. We're all part of the training working group for HOT. So if you're interested in that too, we can. I'll try to pop in the information on how to join the webinar or the working group as we get going. And Michael actually is going to start us off just with the basic requirements, kind of how to install things. Then we'll hand it over to Jeffrey for the concept of layers and what that means in the JOSM editor. Back to Michael for basic editing, and then Ralph will conclude with some other editing tools as you might consider it as well. Thank you.
Russ, can you release your screen?
Yep, just a second. Yep, take it away.
Okay, so I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can see my screen with that browser. Is that right?
Yep, I've got your screen, Michael.
Okay, so welcome everyone from me. So, well, when we are talking about JOSM, the first thing you need is JOSM. And just to get you a quick idea, if you don't know it, there is this website, josm.openstreetmap.de, from where you can download either an untested daily version or the recommended monthly version, the tested one. And what you must be aware of if you want to install JOSM, then you also need Java, at least version 8, and this download page here on their wiki is quite a good starting point if you want to see where you can get it from, how you can install it into various different operating systems, And it also talks about the Java requirements and gives you some hints for troubleshooting. So following through this website, download page here on the JOSM openstreetmap.de should get you started. And once you've got everything up and running, it will more or less look like this. You'll see this one here, and it's very pristine, and we have to do some tweaks here. So the most important key you will need at this stage is F12, or it's the setup. And the first thing you might want to do, and that's the first thing I will start with here right now, the rightmost tab lets you select the language, and so that you can follow it better, I will switch it to English right now, because the default is the language of your operating system, of course. So now that looks a little bit more familiar, and before we can really go into the details of how to use it, we should do some tweaking. Again, F12, or this icon here in the toolbar would open the preferences or settings. And the first thing you should really check is the expert mode down there in the lower left corner. And you easily see that it has an effect of what options are available. A couple of these bits I'll be talking about will only be available in expert mode, so make sure you check that. Then you need to connect it with OpenStreetMap, of course. So here in this main menu icon bar on the left, the second one takes you to the connection settings, and the recommended way is to use OAuth. That means if you hit on this button, Authorize Now, it'll connect you with OpenStreetMap and asks you to supply your username and password, and then an authorization token is stored. So your username and your password will not be stored in plain text in any of these preferences. It's just an authorization token which will be used to communicate with the OpenStreetMap database so that you can commit your changes later on. That needs to be done only once, and then it's stored and you are done. I recommend you to use that and not to use the basic authentication method, because then your password will be stored in plain text here in the JOSM preferences. The fourth icon here in that list, configure available plugins. You don't see any plugins right now. So the download list here, button here in the lower part, is your friend, and it'll present the list of available plugins. You will certainly need a couple of plugins when you start to become more advanced, but right for the start, we only recommend that you really need 2 plugins. So the first one is the buildings tool. That is one you will really need, and later on, Ralph is explaining to you why that is one of the most important bits here in JOSM. And the other one is at the other end of the list. It is the utils plugin 2 that will add a couple of interesting menu items. And when we talk about how to edit, you'll see we will reference a couple of these functionalities which are provided by these plugins. So these are the 2 most essential ones. And then you simply say, OK. And yeah, it informs you that they have been installed and doesn't even need any kind of reboot. If you want to work with the tasking manager, which I suppose you want to do if you're interested in hot projects, then you need to activate the remote control. And yeah, that's the icon here, which looks like a remote control. And it really doesn't need any kind of tweaking. You just say enable remote control, and all of those settings are fine. So that is crucial, that the tasking manager website from the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team can communicate with JOSM. So these are basically all of the essential settings so that you can get started. And before going into more details later on, how you use that for editing, I'd just like to familiarize you with a little bit with how the user interface is organized. And in order to see a little bit more, I have to add at least an empty layer. Otherwise, it won't be fully functional. And so you see that apart from the menus at the top, we've got basically 3 areas here. We've got toolbars on the left, we've got toolbars on the top, and we've got a couple of little tabs, little windows here on the right side. And the buttons here on the left side are mainly from 2 groups. The upper ones determine modes. So the top one, which is the default, is about selecting and moving stuff. And you can always see here in the tooltip that there is also a shortcut. In this case, it's S. And we generally recommend, unless you're really editing something, try to remain here in this mode, selection mode and moving mode. That prevents you from accidentally editing things. And the other one, which we'll use then pretty frequently, is draw nodes, this one. And well, if you don't see that icon, that's what the buildings tool does. So if you installed it correctly, we'll see a couple of more icons as well. And the buttons here in the lower part of this panel, they govern the different windows which you can see on the right side. So the ones shaded in blue are those which are active. And there are a couple of windows more which you can activate. Once you have an area from the world here on your screen, you've loaded data, you've loaded imagery, you will see that those coordinates are always at the point where the center of the screen is. And so that comes in quite handy if you want to communicate with other people. For instance, you want to know if something is correct, you raise an issue either on Slack or on a mailing list with a problem. It's always good to specify where that problem occurs. And well, you can simply click with your left button here, and then you've got to jump to position, which can also take you to a certain position. Those windows on the left give you a little overview. Well, relations here on the lower part is maybe not the one which is of primary interest at the beginning, but those 3 which are available right now are the most important ones. The top one is layers. That's where you will see the data. That's where you will see the imagery. Once you selected an object, tags and memberships, so the properties of these objects will be visible here, and they can be edited from that one in here. And well, selection is as soon as you select something with your mouse, the lower window will be populated. So you will be mainly dealing with those here. And yes, on the top, you have a toolbar which collects a collection of items from all those menus here on the top. And this is something which is user configurable. So you will certainly be interested in removing maybe one of those items you'll never use. You will find that you use a menu item more often, and then you can get it down here. And that is also administered from those preferences, which I mentioned earlier. So yes, customize the elements on the toolbar. It's this 5th from the top. And then you can see here on the left way, this is what is currently available there. And here on the right side, you can basically access any of those menu items which are available here from in the top. And then you can simply select bits and then move them over to the current toolbar here using the keys here in the center. That's something you will really want to use. So in order to make your editing process fairly quickly. And we will talk about more. We'll talk in greater detail about all that when we go through the editing process. But well, that's the thing which should get you started first of all, and get to know how that software is really organized. Unless there are any questions right at this point, I would then hand over to Jeffrey to talk about those layers, and you will hear from me again when we dive into the details of editing.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to take us through, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I'm going to take us through the concept of layers. So one of the things you have to know is how do you get started mapping? And so you need to get data, OSM data into your tasking, into your JOSM, and there are a few ways to do that. And I'll also show you how to do that via the tasking manager, which we use for coordinated mapping. So one of the quick ways how you can get your data layer into JOSM is by using the download button, which is just a green arrow pointing down. The other way to get that is through the file menu, which points you to download data. So if I click on that, there are a few ways. So there is the Sleepy map here, which allows you to draw the AOI, and then you download. There is bookmarks, there's bounding box, areas and places where you can search for place. So I'll just use a Sleepy map to show you how to get my data layer into JOSM. So you have to remember to draw a place that is small enough to be able to download into JOSM. If you download a big area, it will not accept. You can see there is a message here. Download area too large will probably be rejected by the server. So what that means is that you have to zoom in as much as possible to be able to, to download the layer. So I'm going to download an area in Uganda here. So I've zoomed in as much as possible, and I'm drawing a polygon on a rectangle in that area. Then I'll click on download. So once you do that, your data layer is going to be downloaded, and you can see in the layers panel that Michael talked about, it is showing me data layer that has been downloaded. To be able to do something, to be able to edit OSM, you need another layer, and that is the imagery layer. So if you look on the imagery layer here, you can see several options here, and then it's just a matter of choosing which imagery you want to use. Yeah, I'll go on and choose Bing. So from Bing, you can see now the features that are on ground, which means now you can be able to zoom in and be able to trace things, either roads or buildings, if you're doing a remote mapping. Yeah, the other thing that is important is the visibility of your layer here. So I can see now I have two layers added to my JOSM. There's data layer and then there is Bing. So if I click on this eye here, it will hide the Bing layer. So I can now only be able to see the data that is already existing in this area. If I switch it back, I can now see again the imagery. Yeah, so basically with these two layers, you're able to start doing some work. Yeah, but there are also other imagery options available. So there is Bing, Esri, Mapbox, Satellite, Maxa. Yeah, and you can even load more than one if you want to compare. So I've just loaded Maxa, and you can see how it looks like compared to to being. So sometimes when you are doing mapping, you're supposed to find which one is the best image for you to use. Yeah, so that is how to start directly using by going and downloading an area. The other one I want to show you quickly is how you get into JOSM from the tasking manager, which we normally use for coordinated mapping. So I'm just going to go on and delete my layers here. So right now I'm back to 0 with JOSM. So I'm just going now to switch to my tasking manager. So what you can see here is the tasking manager, which we normally use for coordinated mapping. So once I go there and I click on start mapping, it will show me the available projects that I can contribute on. If I'm more interested in a specific place, then I can just search from the search window here. So I'm going to search for a project in Namibia and just use that to demonstrate. So this is a project 8029, which is for mapping buildings in Namibia. So once I select that project, it has a description here of what the project is all about. And down here, I can see, of course, the squares that I can use to, where I can pick one and start mapping. So basically, the tasking manager is a tool that we use to help us to coordinate if several people want to map the same area so that we don't map the same features. So each person picks a square and they go on and finish that. So if I pick one square, you can see here among the, where there is start editor, there are different options to edit with, and one of them is JOSM. So if I select JOSM here and then I click on start editor, I'll see my JOSM starting. So the area has automatically opened up in JOSM, and you can see it is showing OSM data. One thing you have to be aware is the remote control feature that Michael mentioned. If it is not active, enabled, then JOSM will not be able to communicate with the tasking manager. So that's something very important to remember. So to be able to do mapping, I need to add an imagery layer. So from the instructions on the project in the tasking manager, it was saying use Maxa. So I've just loaded Maxa here, and now I can see the features and I can start tracing. Yeah, another thing that is important for you to know with the layers is that the layers, when you have the layers, that a few things you can do with them. One that I mentioned is you can change the visibility of a layer by clicking on this eye here. So I can now see the roads and the data. If I hide the data here, I can now able to see the imagery only without seeing the data layer. So that's just hiding the visibility of a layer. There is this green button here, which is a tick. That shows you which one is the active layer. So right now, the OSM data layer is the layer that is active for editing. You may be having several layers downloaded, but the one with the green tick is the one that will be editable. That is very important. There is also a possibility to change the order of layers. So using these two buttons here, you can see here I'm able to change the visibility of my layer. I mean the order. So OSM data is on top. Here it is on the bottom. So it's very important for the OSM data layer to be on top, because now you can see with it being below the imagery layer, I can't see the data that is existing. When it is on top, I can see the data layer. So the order is very important. The other thing here on layers is you can tweak the opacity of your layer. So for example, if I want to change how the color in my imagery layer, I can have a few controls here which can help me do that. Sometimes the imagery may not be very clear and you need to adjust the opacity or the color to make it a bit more clear for you to be able to identify the feature. The last thing that I want to mention on layers is, yeah, you can delete layers, of course. So for example, if I want to delete the imagery layer from my layers panel, I can just click on this delete button here. So what that means is that I've removed the imagery layer from the project. I've not like deleted and destroyed the imagery. No, I'm just removing it from my project, and I can be able to add it back. So I can add back Maxa, I can add back Bing. So now you can see I have yeah, several layers loaded, and yeah, having several layers loaded in JOSM can also help you to compare the two. So in case something is not clear on one image, I can check on the other and be able to get what it is. So I'm just now trying to compare JOSM to Maxa in case something is not clear. Yeah, so that's how you do work with layers. And yeah, I think I will now switch back, hand over back to Michael.
All right. Okay. So welcome back, and I hope that you can see my JOSM window right now. This I already downloaded a little scenery here from a pretty remote area, and yes, while thinking about that here, what already comes to my mind is one of those things I mentioned earlier with that toolbar up there. One of the things which I use pretty frequently is the download in current view. And that is something which I really want to have on my toolbar. If you put that on your toolbar, then it is this icon here. This simply means, well, you've downloaded that here, then you see, oh, there's kind of an intersection here, which sounds interesting. Let's see if that is properly mapped. And then you would go down through the normal download procedure and draw your rectangle and things like that. Not necessary, you just hit download in current view, and that one is added here to the current editing layer. That comes in quite handy, and that's something I use pretty often. So let's dive into how to do some editing. So typically, as I mentioned, we are in selection mode. Then we should get into editing or drawing mode. Use this icon or simply use the shortcut A. And you can add points, individual single points just with a double click. This adds a point, and that point, well, won't have much information associated with it as such. It is just a geographical entity. And I assume that most of you will be familiar with ID, where you need to set some properties for points. It's pretty much the same in here. So let's say we like to specify that this here is typically some kind of a hamlet. I mean, it's a bit too small for a village, so let's make this a hamlet. And that means we need to assign the relevant tags to this point. So tags are typically available from the presets menu here on the top. And again, there will be a couple of tags which you will assign pretty often. Buildings might be one of them, roads might be one of them. And these are typically the items which I have made available here in the menu bar, here in the top menu bar. So customization is highly recommended here in this way as well. So now we're talking about geography, and we're talking about places, and there you've got all the bits you can select from. And as I said, hamlet sounds appropriate. Of course, when working remotely with aerial imagery, we don't know any names, so simply apply that preset. And now we've got that hamlet marked in here. It is pretty important that when you fill in those forms for the different objects we can draw, that you only fill in those properties you're really sure about. I've seen too many instances in hot projects where people assigned roads the name unnamed road or assigned the name house to a building. Well, of course, that's not what it's intended for. Name is only the name as it is given to it, and typically visible on the ground. So usually we don't bother with names when doing remote mapping. We only take care that it carries the properties which classify it accordingly. So in this case, place, hamlet. Similar things go for roads. And when we talk about what kind of tags to associate with a point or with a line or any other object, it is useful to know that there is one definitive resource, and that is in the OpenStreetMap wiki, and it is the map features page. So map features is basically a collection of nearly everything you can map. Different kinds of buildings, different kinds of points of interest, such as from emergency to education, also land use and anything you can imagine. And we've also got an entry here for places. And if you don't know which tags are really appropriate, it is always a good idea to have a look in here, populated settlements and urban and rural, for instance. And it tells you, well, hamlet will be anything up to maybe something like 100 inhabitants and little infrastructure. If it's beyond that, village is more appropriate. And if it's just 1, 2, or 3 houses, then certainly isolated dwelling is even more appropriate than a hamlet. So in order to obtain a consistent classification style across the world, it is really imperative that we stick to these definitions and don't be misled by the name for that key. That applies particularly when it comes to mapping roads. I'll talk to that a little bit later on. So as you see, if you want to map something with an individual, if you just want to map an individual point of interest or a place name, just use a double click, then you get an individual point, and then don't forget to add the proper preset so that this point gets a meaning. The next object higher up in the hierarchy, you all know them, lines. They can be open, such as in waterways or in roads. They can be closed, such as in buildings and land uses. And well, let's start with the access road to this hamlet, and obviously it should be connected to this main road here. So we start single clicking at this point, and then we continue with single clicks as far down as we can see that. And we terminate it with a double click. And then again, we have to make clear that this is a road, so we need the proper presets. And when it comes to tagging roads, I'd like to draw your attention to a different website, because when we have a look here at highways, you can see it from the images here. This is mainly from the perspective of fairly developed countries, where all roads down to the lowest category typically have a paved surface. This is mostly not true in the areas the humanitarian OpenStreetMap is active in its projects. So a couple of people developed a different tagging guide. It's called Highway Tag Africa, but it's typically applicable to rural and less developed areas in other parts of the world as well. And so this carries a more meaningful images for those kinds of mapping, and also some other descriptions. And basically, when you browse through these descriptions, you learn that anything which connects, any road, any highway which connects to a settlement is at least a residential road. So I've seen that people often tend to designate this as a track. Well, from a European or North American perspective, this might seem appropriate, but well, this is the only highway which connects to the settlement. So what we need here is an unclassified road. So again, you would find this in presets and then highways and then kinds of streets, but comes in quite handy if you put that here into your top menu bar, and then you can easily select the proper one here, and then it's unclassified. And again, don't bother with the majority of all these bits in here. The only thing you might want to add is the surface, because this is clearly an unpaved residential road. But don't worry about any other thing like lanes or names or refs, things which can't be added by remote mapping. So now, and my habit is that soon after that, I hit the S key again, which will take you back to the select mode, that you don't accidentally add any things just by clicking. Now we've made sure that this settlement here is connected with the rest of the world. It's important that you're really connected with different roads, because our maps will be used by emergency and rescue organizations on the ground, and they'd like to know how to get to a settlement. So routing algorithms should work. Therefore, it's important that we have a real road network. Let's look a little bit here in this direction. What you can see here is definitely some kind of a waterway, and this road here seems to cross it. And it's pretty obvious that there is some kind of a bridge. In this case, it certainly is not a ford. So, well, so let's quickly draw at least some relevant part of the waterway. And so let's get back to edit mode. And waterways are one of those features where the direction of the way counts. It's always the direction of the flow of the water. So let me just add a few bits here. And of course, it should connect here to that lake here, to that ocean as well. Then we need a proper preset for water. So this is a river. And then, well, if someone is going to validate all that, you will run into trouble, because, well, this intersects with that road and you don't know what is on top of each other. Well, it's pretty obvious that the water won't be on top of the road, but from this mapping alone, you wouldn't be able to guess whether it's a bridge or a ford. And particularly in some rainy season, that makes a big difference whether the settlements are accessible or not. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this portion of the highway is really marked as a bridge. So again, we go into editing mode, and in order to do that fairly precisely, we need to add some points. I do that with double clicks in here, where the bridge will start and end. I go back to the editing mode. I select those 2 points. In order to do that, I hold down my shift key so that I add to some selection. And I also need the highway as a whole. And then you've got this icon up here, which says split away at the selected node, which means it will turn the whole section of highway, which is highlighted, into 3 pieces, the bridge and the 2 pieces before and after that. And then it will ask me, before doing so, which segment should reuse the history of the previous way. Well, the default is always the longest one, and typically that's not bad an idea. And now we've got the segment alone. It's a highway, it's unclassified, as we saw it, but now we have to make it a bridge, and we have to make sure that this one is above the waterway. So, and then we go back here to this editing panel where this one has been highlighted here. And I click on this highway streets unclassified and get back to this form where I can enter all kinds of properties. And in this case, I need 2 more. First of all, here is a checkbox, which designates it as a bridge, which will add the relevant symbol to maps. And this layer here is also something we have to change. And well, that naming scheme is a little bit unfortunate, because this layer here has nothing to do with the layers we see here in the top right window of our JOSM. Those layers, the ones which Jeffrey has been talking about, are imagery and mapping layers in JOSM only, no layers in the database, and finally on any map generated with it. The layer here is only the layer in the database and on any maps. And the convention is layer 0 is the surface of the Earth. That's the default, and you never need to attribute that. So, and anything else is either above or for negative indices below the surface. And this is just relative. This is no indication of any meters or anything like that. So in this case, we only assign layer 1, which means it's, well, simply above layer 0. And if you would have some railway bridge which goes on top of all that, that railway bridge would get layer 2 in this example. Similar if we wouldn't have a bridge, but if that part of the waterway would flow in a tunnel, or if a highway is in a tunnel, then you mark that with layer -1 to make sure that it's really below the Earth. So these are open lines, well, closed lines. Well, I'm not going to talk too much about buildings, because Ralph will introduce you to the buildings plugin later on, which is a much better way to draw buildings. But in this case, this hamlet might deserve the land use area. So let's roughly figure out what belongs to this hamlet. Something like this. And when you finish up with a double click, you've got the area. Well, to make it look a little bit nicer, we should square it. That would be the Q shortcut. So then it looks fairly nice. And in the presets again, we've got just a minute. It's well, it's oh God, yeah. So preferences. That's when you man-made building is not. Anyone can tell me quickly where geography, land use, there we are, yeah, it's geography. And then this one would be a residential area. Again, we don't issue a name. We don't know how that one's called. And yeah, might want to make sure that the place is maybe inside that land use. So if one looks for that by geographic relations, then it's clearly found this place belongs to that land use. So that's, well, the most important bits. If you mark something like a land use, really make sure that last click is on the first point so that the area is closed. But there are a couple of tools, and particularly when you use JOSM and you upload that, it will remind you that, that's not going to work. By the way, if you accidentally draw some land use and you would accidentally do something like this. So from this perspective, it looks pretty closed. Well, in fact, it wasn't. But if you then try to associate it with anything, it will tell you the preset residential area cannot be applied since the selection is unsuitable. If you read something like that, it is highly probable that you didn't really close that. So in this case, go back to selection, and instead of fumbling around with those two bits, simply select the two of them. And in the tools menu, you find merge nodes, and then you're done. And then assigning this land use preset should work once you select it again. Of course, unselected bits cannot receive anything here. So residential area now works. So there is a little bit of of checking built into JOSM, which makes sure that you cannot apply tags which are intended for areas only to any non-area objects here. So that should get you started in mapping points of interest and lines such as used in waterways, highways, and land uses. And basically you could draw buildings in pretty much the same way, but you will soon learn that there are more intelligent approaches to that. And that basically brings me to the end of basic editing part 1. And unless there are any urgent questions, I think we should hand over to Ralph, who will dive more into the subject.
Thanks, Michael. And while Ralph gets ready here, yeah. So I'll skip a few questions, but I would like to ask, I'm going to launch a poll here and just get people's opinion, or and hopefully that launched and you guys see that. And Ralph, you can go ahead and start as soon as you are ready, but I just, yeah, while we're kind of in the midst, I'll collect the results.
Right, folks, can you see my JOSM now?
Perfectly.
All right, I've got the poll screen up. Right, that's gone. Okay, folks, my job here is to help you with the basic mapping itself. As you can see, I've selected an area with quite a lot of buildings. I'll be showing you how to draw these buildings and the basic tools to use for those. I'm going to select an open area here, first of all, to demonstrate what I'm going to do. But let me explain that all through my example, I will be calling out shortcut keys. This is a quick way of doing your mapping. So get to know your shortcut keys by using it regularly and often, and it starts to become second nature to you. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to first of all show you how you find your shortcut keys. All of these items along the top here of your JOSM give you the various things that you can use, and alongside them are the shortcut keys. Okay, so you can actually see a lot of the shortcut keys simply by looking at your tools and seeing what those tools are. Michael showed you the presets, and I will explain to you in terms of personal knowledge as far as mapping is concerned. Now, another place that you can see where you can get shortcuts is to look down at the bottom right-hand corner here, which gives you some ideas of what you can and can't use. Right, we're going to start off with basic buildings. The basic shape is the rectangle or square. Recognizing a building, buildings have different colored and different shaped roofs. they cast a shadow to show that these are raised above the ground. So anything raised above the ground will cast a shadow. Excuse me. And they will all cast the shadow in the same direction in the area you're working on. So that where you have a building, please note that you can also get shadows from a wall around a building. So when you are drawing, please try to identify which is a building. You can see the building has the shadow on one or two sides only and not on the other. The wall will have shadows on all its sides, as you can see. So that is hollow inside. There's no roof on the top blocking it out. It's just a wall. Right, we're going to start first of all with our basic shape, and that is done with the building tool. The building tool you do download and add as one of your plugins, and that gives you the ability to draw buildings quickly and easily. Now, if I click on that, it gives me a changed cursor. I'll show you. The normal cursor is like that, and the building cursor has got a little building to the right of it. This building tool can be changed quite easily into different shapes, and I'll show you to explain that just a bit later. What we're going to do is use the building tool to create a rectangular building. So we choose one corner of the building, and we click once. Choose the second corner, click again, and then drag the building size across. What happens is it automatically, let's just select, press the S key. My JOSM is not working. What's happened? Let's select that. Right. So I select the outline, and I can see in here that it has automatically given me the key building and the value yes, which is what we normally use. So back, I'm going to press B. Okay, I'm back to the building tool. I select one corner, select the other corner, and just drag it out. Press S, and I've got building yes. So it's automatically tags it as a building yes. It automatically squares. So this is brilliant because you don't have to worry about your squaring of buildings. And right, I go to press B again, and I can carry on my mapping. I can do this quickly and fast, and I can get quite a lot of buildings done just like that. Okay, and each one of them is already squared and is already tagged as building yes. So there's no tagging involved. It's just automatic and quick. So now let's have a look at what happens when we have an L-shaped building. Right, we're going to use the shortcut key J, which I will explain to you, to join. So I select building, and let's get this right. I select building, and I do my first one. I select the building. By selecting the building, that means any other building that I do will be squared to this building. Now, this is important so that you don't have to worry about squaring afterwards. Right now, I want to carry on my L shape. So I press B to give me the building tool. And then what I do is I create that L-shaped section. I press S, hold down my Shift key. The Shift makes it possible for me to select both at the same time. They are now both selected. You can see both buildings are selected. I hold down my Shift key and I press J. So holding down the Shift key and press J, and that joins the two buildings. However, joining the two buildings like this will give me extra nodes, which I need to get rid of. So what I do is with the S key down, once I press the S key, I have my selection mode. I select Shift, select. I've got the 2 nodes I don't need. I press delete on my keyboard, and I now have a squared building with no extra nodes. Now I'm going to introduce another plugin tool, which is very, very useful, because this means you've got the extra points that you need to get rid of. Plus, of course, this is building yes. Okay, right. So let's have a look at what we're going to do now. I'm going to select the building tool. All right, let's get rid of this because you saw how that was drawn, so I'll delete that. And let's do it again. Select, press B for the building tool. Draw my building. Now I want to draw that extra piece. I press the X key, which is the extrude, which is a plugin that you download. I double click on the place where I want to draw. So that is the section I want to extrude. I grab that with my extrude tool and it just drags it out. Now you can see there are no extra nodes to worry about. I still have it as building yes, and it is still squared. So remember, pressing download the extrude key as a plugin, and you can just press X on your keyboard. That will give you that. Press S to go back to select, and there we have it. Right. Now we also have round buildings. So how do we use our keys to get to buildings that are round? This is really quite simple. We once again press the building key. So we've got our basic building. You can see I can draw basic buildings with that. Now I need to draw a round building, but I need to swap between, because when we're doing Africa, you have rectangular and round buildings, which quite proliferate the area, and we need to swap between the two. If I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and I'm in building tool mode, please note, building tool mode. I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and I press Z. Now, having done that, you can see that the node, the cursor has now got a bullet shape rather than the rectangular shape. All I need to do now is to draw the line across the center point of the building, and click again, and it automatically gives me a round building. So I can draw different sized round buildings for the different sized huts or buildings that I'm trying to display. To get back to my rectangular tool, I just press Alt and R, and that gives me the building tool again. So I can switch between and just keep mapping with building tools. That is the quickest and easiest way I know of for doing buildings, and it really helps me. The extrude tool, X, double click and change. You can make many different shapes using the extrude tool. It's quite useful. Double click, extrude, so you can make more shapes. Now I'm going to get rid of that. Use the select and just grab around there and delete. I've got rid of that. Now, how do we treat a building that's got a courtyard or hole in the middle? This is used by the idea of multi-polygons. And it links the two together. So what I do is I select my building tool, and I want to draw my basic building shape. Right, I've got my basic building shape there. I select the basic building shape because I want to draw more shapes. I select B again for building, and I can draw that shape. I can then draw that shape. I can then draw this shape. Right, now I've got all of those now drawn. I press my S key to select. I hold down the Shift key and I select all 4 of those. Now I've got all 4 selected. I hold down the Shift key and I press J. That automatically creates a multi-polygon building with 2 members, okay? And you now have a building with a hole in the middle. You can see that you know it's a hole in the middle because this is a different color to the outer. That's the outer shape and that's the inner shape. That's as quick and easy as it is to draw a multi-polygon building. Now, if you don't have to draw, it's a perfect square. Here we have a perfect square. So let's try this. We'll go back to the building tool and we'll just draw a single outline all the way in. All right. Now we need to draw the inner. So let's do the inner here. And I drag my building tool, but this is not perfectly square. So I can still use, let me just select building tool and I'll do another square there. Select so that I've got both highlighted, press J, and that gives me that. I just need to get rid of that node. So select and delete, and that gives me the inner shape. I select the inner shape and the outer shape, and I go up to my tools, and you see down here it says create a multi-polygon or Control B. So there we have it. All I do is I hold down the Control key and I Shift B, and it creates the multi-polygon the same as that is. So you've got 2 ways. Either you've got multiple buildings that you use your Shift J, or you do 2 separate buildings, one inside the other, and you press Control B. Both of those will give you a multi-polygon with an outer and an inner. Right, so there we have basic buildings, swapping between buildings, round and rectangular, and we also have buildings with a hole in the middle. I've showed you the extrude tool so that you can do L-shaped buildings. Are there any questions at this stage? Okay, right, please type in your questions, and Russ, Jeffrey, and Michael will try and get back to you while we're doing that. There's one thing that you need to know about in the roads and buildings and things like that is that if you need to get your nodes all in a single line, select the individual nodes using your pressing S so that you have your select key, hold down the Shift, get all the nodes that you want in a straight line, and just press L on your keyboard, L, and it automatically jumps to a straight line. Okay, that's a quick, easy way of getting your roads all to line up, especially if you've been joining a whole lot of nodes along nodes along a single line, and you want to join them up in a straight line. That's a very useful tool to use as well. Let's just see. What happens if we create an error? Let's just say I draw a building, so I'm going to press building tool, and I link my building tool. I'm going to link this to a road. Let's just use select and put a node there. A double click, a double click. Right, now I'm going to select Shift M, select Shift M. Right, now I have my building actually joined onto a road. Now if I try to save this. So I want to download, and it should in actual fact tell me, oops, that is not quite working, right? When you try to download, but I'm not doing this direct from my tasking manager. What I'm doing is from a OSM.OSM that I have saved, so it doesn't do that, but you will get that coming up. I'm going to delete that now. delete. So that should not happen. You should not join to a road or to a land use or any other line that doesn't work. You should not have a building joining to a river either. So please bear that in mind. Right. I've been through the buildings. I'm now going to take you to a different scenario, and we're going to have a look at open recent waterways. Right, now Michael told you about a bridge along a road. Waterways have 3 ways of crossing your roads, and that is a bridge, as Michael told you. The next one is a culvert, and the third one is a ford. Now your waterways should have one of these available. You can see here, this has already been drawn. A very good example of a bridge across a large river. It has a node one end at the start of the bridge, a node at the other end at the start of the bridge, and you can see it's separated from, and you've got here bridge, yes, and a layer 1. That is because bridge is going over the water, so the layer has got to show that it is above the water, which layer 1 does. Here we are. There's a different bridge, so I'm going to show you creating this bridge again. Once again, using your shortcut tools. Press A and double click to put a node either end of the bridge. Use your select tool to select and press P to split the road from the continuity. So you break the continuity of the road. So this is an isolated section. Highlight the isolated section, and in here you add, here we go, you add bridge, BR, bridge, and you press yes. Okay, and it gives you bridge yes. You add the extra, which is the layer, and the layer is 1 to put it above the river. Okay, right, you have created the bridge over the river. Now I'm going to have a look and see. Here we have a track or unclassified road. It's not being used for farm. It may be access to farmland, so it would be a track. Okay, so let's first of all draw in the river. So I'm going to use my A to use the line tool, and I'm going to draw in my waterway here. Select that, add waterway stream. Okay, I'm now going to draw the road, so I'm going to select A again. You can see a road is a number of straights and curves, so just make sure you go straight and round the curve and straight again. Select, let's add highway, and it's a track, so okay, I've got my highway track crossing my waterway. Now there is no discernible bridge or culvert or anything like that. So what it needs is at the intersection, this is the only case where you have a road and a river intersecting. Okay, you put a node at the intersection point. So I press A again, I select so that both the waterway and the road are highlighted. At that point, I double click to put a node. The node is selected. I press my S key again, it's selected. I go here and I add Ford. It automatically comes up Ford and Ford, yes. Okay, now this is the one that doesn't need a layer. Why? Because the waterway and the road are at the same level. So we don't need to add any layers to show the one is above or below the other one. Okay, I hope that has cleared. Now I'm going to come here and I'm going to show you a culvert. I'm going to switch off my map layer so that you can see what I'm talking about. You can see there's no discernible change in level of the road anywhere along here. As you saw with the bridge, there was a definite point when you could see where the bridge started and where the bridge ended. But that isn't happening, but you still have a shadow here, which shows that there's a concrete culvert going underneath this road, which is built up along an embankment. So there's no bridge here. This is an embankment and the river goes underneath the road. So let's just put the road in again. So I use my escape A tool and I draw my, sorry, let me show you. Escape, Control Z. Okay, I've got a road here. So I'm going to then say I need a waterway going underneath. So I'm going to press my A key again, quickly put in a waterway, select, add waterway river. Okay, now I've got the river there. Now, in this case, the culvert is going under and the culvert is attached to the waterway, not the road. So what I need to do is I need to make my split on the waterway. I can do that either by taking the little plus sign and dragging that, take the little plus sign and drag that, so that it is the width of the culvert. Okay. Alternatively, I can use the A key and I can double click to add extra nodes. So I select the two nodes to isolate this piece of waterway from the rest. I press P to isolate it. I select my waterway and I add here I add a tunnel. And the tunnel is a culvert. You can see how quickly and easily this comes up and finds. If you want to look for it, you can use the drop-down menu to find what your alternatives for tunnel is. So if I haven't actually, I haven't put in my tunnel because I can't remember. I put tunnel there and I use my drop-down. I can select culvert from that, right? So I've got culvert selected, okay, and it gives me tunnel culvert. Now that still also needs a layer, so I add my layer, and this time the waterway is going under the road. It needs to be -1, so it's below the road. Okay, my culvert is now layer -1, tunnel culvert on the waterway river. Okay, there we are. Those are the three ways of making roads crossing waterways. Now, I am going to move on here now, and please remember that when you're doing your mapping, whatever mapping you have done, please use your validation. Now to open your validation window in your layers here, you select it from the blue cross on the left-hand panel. You see this blue cross? This blue cross is what adds a layer, extra window layer here, which is validation results. Now make sure that the area you have mapped has nothing highlighted by pressing your S key and double clicking in an open area, so nothing is selected. Then what you do is you go down to the button and you press validation, and that runs a validation, and it will give you warnings and things to look out for. It says here you've got a crossing barrier highway. So I can open up these by pressing on the little plus signs, and it takes me down. How do I zoom in to find out where that problem is? I click on that problem area and I right click. It gives me the zoom to the problem. I click on zoom to the problem and it takes me straight there. Now it's saying crossing barrier and highway. So in other words, what I've got is a barrier that is blocking a highway. Like these yellow signs will show me what the problem is. They're on a separate layer, validation errors. I can switch that off to have a look and see. Now I've got a road crossing. What is this? This is a gate. Okay. Now the road should in actual fact have a node that links with the gate. So I once again use my select tool and I double click use my and double click that, and that gives a node that joins at the gate. Okay, I can then say add barrier gate. Okay, and that's how we show a gate on the road, not a gate the width, because the gate on the width doesn't then clashes with the road. So we've got a gate on the road. I run my validation again. Now node duplicate and parent weight tags, that's something else. Zoom, and what it's saying is I'm duplicating the barrier, and that's unacceptable. So please, either a barrier connecting, let's delete that and just say A, double click, select, and validation. And once again, it's gone. So if you have a barrier gate that is blocking a road, you need to connect the road to it. Okay, then you don't get an error. If we had a building, let's just say A, join a building to this, select, add building, yes, okay. If I had that and I press my validation, it's not coming up. Okay, that is a no-no, and validation. Oops, not coming up. Okay, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong. Oh, okay, I understand. I'm not in tasking manager mode, so this isn't downloaded from the tasking manager, so it's not coming up. But that will come up in your validation results when you're doing that. Okay, now please use validation, and you will get errors and problems coming up from that. Let me see if I can download. Okay, I'm not going to go to file, open recent. run validation. And it brings up a whole lot of warnings. Okay, here we are. I've got an area where I've got a lot of buildings, and it brings up a lot of warnings. So it's better able to show you. When I open up, it tells me which ones: crossing building and highway, crossing buildings, missing tag, incomplete object. So it gives me a whole series of items that I need to be looking for here. So all I need to do is click on the plus, and it brings up all 5 of those. Click on the one, right click to zoom to the problem, and it takes me straight into the problem where road and buildings cross each other. Okay, right, I've been through the basics for you now. I'm going to hand back to the team, and if there are any questions, we'll see if we can handle those.
Great, thanks, Ralph. Let me just quickly, while we're kind of in transition, I'll put up the results from the last poll. So kind of interestingly, the folks in the room that answered the poll are about 50-50 split between either yes, they have used JOSM, or no, or unsure. So yeah, I mean, just a little tidbit of information that is good for us as panelists and designers of these trainings to know. And what I'd like to do is maybe just put up one more poll. And if you want, if you have questions and you want any of the panelists to go back over something, or maybe go over something that you didn't hear, please put that in the chat. And the last poll that I'll do tonight is just a kind of fun one. Is what is your favorite editing tool for OpenStreetMap? So either JOSM, the ID editor, Potlatch, which I'm sure very few people, maybe just myself, would answer, and then other. And unfortunately, since my connection was really bad, I have lost all the old chat. So to the other panelists, please go back and make sure that we've either answered in text, or if anybody wants to address any of the previous questions, please do. And then we can get to the most recent question was from Mohammed. So before we get to that one, I'll make sure that we've answered all the others.
Okay, while we have a quiet period, I can handle Mohammed's question with regard to the validation, as we've just done that. Yes, Mohammed, you would fix the buildings that are attached to another, or where you have errors with buildings. You would try and fix all of those if your project is about buildings. If your project includes roads, then you would try and fix the road errors as well. If it includes waterways, then very definitely you would need to fix those. When you run your validation, please remember what your project is about. If you are only drawing buildings, try and fix all the building errors as much as you can. Or if there are errors still existing that you don't know how to fix, please leave a note in the comments to say there are certain errors like JOSM building attached to roads that need fixing. Could someone please have a look at this? So please leave a note in the comment if there's some things you don't know how to fix or can't fix at that stage. Right, that's Mohammed's answer to buildings crossing other buildings in validation. Back to you, Russ.
Yeah, there was also a question from Shai Maga, who was asking that sometimes the remote control is on and Safari doesn't let you switch to JOSM. Yeah, like remote control is not working on Safari. Yeah, I think For me, I think the solution that would be to try another browser and maybe work through Chrome or Firefox and see if that works. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a known issue with certain installations of Safari. So might improve with Task Manager 4, but no guarantees. Yeah, I would say the for sure solution is to use probably Chrome or Firefox would work better for you. The poll results are also, pretty interesting. Even though lots of you haven't really used JOSM a bunch, it's already your favorite editors, so that's great. I would just ask if one person who answered other would just throw in the chat what the editor that you prefer is. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to know. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, keep the questions coming if you've got them. I think we have, another 4 minutes kind of scheduled, and then we actually have the Zoom. We can keep going until I think the top of the hour, but yeah, if everybody's questions have been answered, then we can also end a few minutes early. Plugins for beginners. Any of the panelists want to take that one on?
I think the best one is the building plugin. Yeah, very useful, especially when you're switching from ID editor to JOSMs. It's interesting to see how faster you can map with the buildings plugin. So yeah, I would really recommend that one for a beginner to start with.
Yeah, I guess I would throw in, if you want to have an additional imagery source from the ground, you can add the Mapillary or the OpenStreetCam plugins. Those are both, kind of photos from the ground. So if you're trying to map buildings or even roads, sometimes you can get the street names from those imagery sources. So those are kind of fun to play with. Maybe a little more advanced, but definitely nothing a new mapper should be too worried about. And yeah, we'll just go a minute or two longer because I kind of promised at the beginning that I would get you guys information on the training working group itself. And then my connection was horrible and I've been battling that the whole time. So I think the best thing is to, I'm going to drop a link in the chat, which is the calendar for all the working groups, and the training working group information can be found right in that calendar, as well as information for most of our working groups. So there's that. And yeah, Timothy just asked another, any favorite items to add to the toolbar? I love the download data in view things, and yeah, by items means tools. I don't actually, I think I just use the standard default toolbar. So does anybody have some suggestions on that?
Well, I usually have those presets which I need most. So definitely the one for highways and also buildings and maybe waterways. But it depends on your context. But if you are really in mapping mode in a way, and map feature, assign tags, those presets in the toolbar can be pretty handy. And just let me add something else. If some more questions arise after we close the session, there are basically two channels which I'd like to share with you. You can either send us an email to the Mapper support, or you can join Slack and head over to that channel. And that's where typically everyone can get help on any kinds of mapping related questions. Might take a while before they're answered, but we try to answer everything which comes in there.
All right. Well, it looks like no more questions are coming in, so we'll stop here, and as soon as we can, we'll get the video up for those of you that maybe missed some stuff like me while you're battling your internet. But other than that, yeah, like Michael said, please reach out anytime, and we'll try to get your questions answered offline. Thanks, and thanks again to the panelists. You guys are getting really good at this, so yeah, look forward to here in a couple of months we'll do advanced JOSM. So look for the invites and things to come in the near future.
Russ?
Yeah.
If I may interrupt before everyone starts disappearing, I have put in the chat a couple of plugins that would be very useful to you. The one is the building tools, which we mentioned. Another is measurement, that helps you to work out the width of a road, to figure whether it's a path or a road, or the size of a building to work out whether it's just a chicken coop or whether it's an outhouse or a building. The other one is the terracer, which helps you to split a building into a number of different sized of the same sized units for terracing. And the utils plugin 2 is a very useful one that you may very well like to explore and find out all the new and various tools in that. Please remember also that all of these do give you shortcut keys, so learn the shortcut keys and get used to using them. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, perfect, Ralph. And that's a good segue too, because I think we go into some of those in the advanced JOSM webinar. So if you can't wait, there's the recording of the last time on our YouTube channel. And yeah, just real quick, Mohammed, yeah, of course, through tasks.hotosm.org, that's where all of our public projects are. So yeah, just jump in there, find a project that you're interested in, and yeah, we're always looking for more mappers. So yeah, please do. And yeah, either ID or JOSM, either works. Okay, yep, have a good day or night or morning from getting somewhat late here in the Philippines. Take care.
Yep, okay, thanks all for attending, and bye to